I was sitting in Los Angeles and I was thinking, Last Night in Soho was going to be my next film. I really wanted to do something completely different, that was a real departure for me, something that was a challenge in a lot of ways, something that was more serious, a film that had like female leads, and I knew it was like the right thing to do is to sort of, after Baby Driver, is to make an original movie, like, as you know, rather than go straight into a sequel or to sort of like, you know, go off and do a franchise movie. It's like, if I have the opportunity to make an original film, I have to take it. The first meeting that we had about it was with our location manager, Camilla Stevenson, because once you've written the script, the very first thing you think about is like, can we pull this off in Soho? Because that's important. I don't really want to be recreating Soho like in another area. So we kind of grabbed the bull by the horns and said, we're going to make this film in central London. And so what that requires is an enormous amount of planning, the amazing cooperation of the City of Westminster to let us actually shoot in areas of London that never close. Even on a Sunday, like, Soho doesn't shut. So you have to figure out a way to work around Soho to shoot scenes that take place in the modern day and to shoot scenes that take place in 60s London with period dressing and period cars and changing all the signs and changing all the ground floors of everything. And it was a, you know, a Herculean endeavor, and I think it's a credit to my location team, production design, and ADs, all of the AD department, that we were able to sort of pull it off. Because there were some days that I came to work and thought, I don't know whether we're going to pull this off. Because it's like, Soho is an area, it cannot be tamed. And so you had to figure out a way to make the movie with real life happening all around you. The costume design was obviously a huge part of the process because it's actually, you know, baked into the plot in terms of that Eloise gets inspiration from the 60s and what the character of Sandy, who she's becoming obsessed by, is wearing, and that almost becomes the key to kind of her creative expression in the modern day, and she starts to get some success on her course through being inspired by the girl who she sees when she goes to sleep. So with all that in mind, we knew that the first dress that Sandy is going to wear has to be like a knockout dress, but also something that in its way has its own personality. And so it's something where I feel like Sandy and the dress become kind of intertwined, and the dress in itself kind of has sort of a quite ethereal feeling about it. You're in a dream state, and she's got this kind of amazing sort of like floating dress, of almost that she seems like a sort of shimmering mirage in a way. So we talked a lot with our amazing costume designer, Odile Dix-Moreau, about what those costumes would be, and obviously taking a lot of inspiration from the past and looking at kind of dresses from the time and the material and the people wearing them and the designers. So that was, I mean, that's the fun part of it, where you sort of get to sort of, you know, kind of turn back the clock and look at all these amazing fashions from the 60s.
Stood by your side through all of the lies, watching you cry for me. Get on your knees, apologize please. No, why don't you die for me?
One of Odile Dix-Moreau's credits was the film An Education, which I thought did the 60s brilliantly, and it stuck in my head as a film where I felt like the period work was really well done and didn't feel like it fell into those cliches that you sometimes get of like swinging London. So I wanted to work with her, and you know, even just my first meeting with her was just like an explosion of like reference that was just like, oh, this is obviously the right person for the job, and she was really excited by the prospect of it. And I guess in terms of Sandy's costumes, there's a way of, you know, showing narrative throughout the costume designs, and so that was something both with costume and hair and makeup how we can tell Sandy's story and the arc of her journey through her costumes. When Eloise travels to the 60s, we wanted the film to feel a little different at that point, and there were a couple of things we did to achieve that. One was just about palette control, in terms of we wanted the 60s to explode in color. You know, obviously, like a lot of archive of the time, there's lots of black and white photography, or like, you know, like TV at that time wasn't necessarily in color in the mid-60s. But there were a lot of films of the period that are shot in Technicolor. And I always like watching films from the 60s that are shot in like vivid, almost hallucinatory Technicolor. So that was the idea, is that when we go into the mid-60s, we want to feel like we're going from not a black and white film into color, but more like a muted color film into a Technicolor film. And so that was something that we achieved partly just through the actual colors that we're using within the scenes, within the costumes, within the set design, and also it was done by switching the film. We were shooting on spherical lenses in the modern day scenes, and then switching to anamorphic lenses in the 60s. Chung is from South Korea. It was interesting to me to bring his eye to a London movie. Like, how does he see the city? So in the same way that Eloise is somebody who's coming from the country to London for the first time, you know, I have a cinematographer from South Korea who also works in other, you know, he's worked in the States a lot. He never shot a film in central London. And so I was always interested to see how he saw it. And, you know, we really kind of gelled immediately upon meeting. Like, he read the script, I showed him the storyboards, you know, reference material, and obviously what he's achieved in his work is like just, he's an incredible cinematographer. So it was very exciting to work with him, and I think all of the crew and the cast like loved working with him as well, because he's just one of those people who's so creative and in ways that are always a little unexpected. Like some of my previous movies, sometimes the songs inspire the scenes, or sometimes the songs are there as a reminder to make the movie. So, you know, like I said, I had an idea for the story. I started making a little playlist of songs that I wanted to feature that conjured up the mood of the movie for me. And then sometimes if I heard that track randomly in the time before I'd started writing, say I heard R. Dean Taylor's "There's a Ghost in My House," I'd be like, I've got to make Last Night in Soho. So it would be these things, almost like the songs would be like post-it note reminders. You must make this film. So those things, like sort of songs, that sort of really drive the writing process for me, because much like in the film, Eloise like uses the music as a time travel machine, essentially. You know, the sound of the 60s kind of like propels her back into that decade. And I guess it was the same thing, writing it is obviously like so evocative of time.
Good. And action.
The best that you could hope for with any film is that the audience feel like they've had an experience at the end of it. And I think in this movie, you get to go on a journey with Thomasin McKenzie's character Eloise. And she isn't the same at the end of the film, and hopefully neither are the audience. And, you know, it's interesting. I take this as a compliment. One of my friends saw an early cut of the movie, and he called me a couple of days later. He goes, "I had a dream about your film." He said, "I had a dream about Soho and neon flashing, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And I was like, well, good. I said that's the desired effect, is that, you know, the film is about kind of these extremely vivid, like visceral visions, and you know, if like somebody watches the movie and then when they close their eyes at night they start thinking about things that they've seen in the movie, then there's, you know, what more could you ask for? You know, the worst crime is like the movie where you've forgotten what even happened in the movie by the time you've got to the parking lot. That's not good. So if people are sort of like thinking about the movie for a long time afterwards, if it's haunting them, then you've done your job. I have nothing against like watching things at home. During lockdown, I have probably watched upwards of 500 movies at home. However, I hope it's not controversial to say that the film is best experienced first on the big screen. It was designed for the big screen in terms of like the look and the mix, and just, you know, in a film where you're immersing yourself in like another world on the big screen, you get to go down the rabbit hole with Eloise in a way maybe doesn't work quite as well if you're looking at it on your phone. That's not again to sort of say that like you can't do that, but I would love people to have the opportunity to see it on the big screen. And so I'm very like sort of thankful that we were able to push the release so that that was possible, because the idea of it just going straight to sort of like a home release was not something I was particularly kind of excited about, because, you know, I love going to the cinema. Like, I think the experience of sitting in the dark with strangers is like sometimes like more than half the fun. And, you know, you want to feel like you want to go on a journey with a movie, and there's no question that the big screen is more transportative.
Segueing from Edgar Wright, I believe it's a really good thing to go to theaters and make sure that you see this film, including most of his movies. They're very, very immersive, especially with music, sound, and visuals. Movie theaters are great to just isolate all that sound and all that noise from the outside world for you to even better enjoy the film. And I love all his movies. Let me know down in the comments down below one of your favorite films of Edgar Wright. Have you seen Baby Driver? Have you seen Scott Pilgrim vs. the World? Did you know he did Shaun of the Dead? That's one of my favorite films of his, which I purchased on Steelbook, which you could go ahead and check out on one of my videos about our trip to FYE. So if you like all this type of stuff, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Really helps me out here, and I'll see you here next time. Later.